Our next speakers are Cassandra Debets and Megan Barker. Cassandra is from Simon Fraser University and the University of Manitoba, and Megan is from Simon Fraser University. They will share their talk titled Teaching Assistant Peer Observation of Labs and Tutorials, Increased Confidence, Community, and Mindset in both novice and veteran TAs. Cassandra, when you're ready.
Thank you for that introduction, and hi everyone. I'm excited to share some of the results that we've been working on looking at TA training at Simon Fraser University and the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. There we go. So what do we know about the TAs? Based on prior work with the large introductory biology courses, we know that the teaching assistants receive little to no training and were generally left to figure things out for themselves on top of all their demanding coursework or graduate research work. They often reported feeling stressed, anxious, ill-prepared, and isolated. This is definitely part of our larger picture of the crisis in higher education and training, pedagogical training of instructors. So we wanted to support and enrich the well-being of our TAs using shared courses as an opportunity. We wanted to help them build community for practice that would really center around their teaching abilities to provide them with a sense of community with their peers and also their own growth mindset for their pedagogical skills. We also know that in order to provide that training for large enrollment multi-section courses, that can be a large time commitment for the instructor to do alone. So an alternative or a secondary approach with having peer observations was to help alleviate some of the time constraints that would be placed on the instructor. Our main research questions then focused on how does the process of peer observation and feedback influence TA's confidence, sense of community, and overall teaching perspectives? Are there increased benefits from peer observation for TAs using structured or informal observational design? And do novice, inexperienced TAs or more veteran experienced TAs benefit more from having the peer observation intervention? So in building the support for our TAs, we designed an intervention where the TAs would go to each other's lab sections to observe and provide comments and feedback. And so the idea was that this would help involve TAs in the process of peer observation, discussions, and pedagogical development. We were interested in their perspectives on the value and feelings of this intervention around classroom observation, with the idea that helping them to start to be more comfortable being observed by others and also going and observing their peers, it would help open the door for them to, with the idea of value of collecting evidence in their own classrooms so that they could further their own teaching development and skills. So the two approaches we had for this involved a structured approach and an informal approach. The structured approach included a modified classroom observational tool or COPUS, training and discussion, so that these TAs using the structured approach actually had, in addition to their regular lab prep meetings, learned how to use this tool and used it in one of the large lecture sections that they already attended as part of their TA duties. Then they were assigned to go and observe a partner deliver their lab or tutorial, and it would be a reciprocal observation. This was randomly assigned due to scheduling. After their first observation, they were asked to meet and discuss their observations and talk about the modified COPUS tool that they use to look at how they use time in the classroom and overall their pedagogical skills. We asked in the structured approach for the TAs to then do a second observation. So same idea where they would go to one of their the same peers TA tutorial and provide feedback and meet once both of them had observed each other. So this led to having a first observation and a second observation. Throughout the term, the TAs also discussed what they were observing in regular lab meetings. In the informal approach, there was no modified COPUS tool used. The TAs attended regular lab meetings that was focused on prep content, and then they were just asked to go and observe their peers, just like in the structured approach, and provide two pieces of constructive feedback. There was no specific outline or questions of things to look for. And so this first observation is really what unites the two approaches. There was no second approach or second observation in the informal approach. Both designs had pre and post surveys. So we had asked TAs questions about their thoughts and feelings about being observed, their own sense of community and their mindset before the observations and then after. For the informal approach, this would have only included the one intervention of the single observation. In the survey design, it was a mixed methods approach where we combined Likert questions and long form open-ended qualitative questions that we then coded. The questions really centered around the feelings of how being observed, whether that was them being observed directly or how they felt going and observing one of their own peers. There were questions about pedagogical training and thoughts for their own teacher mindset, teaching strategies, and their teaching abilities. And there was also questions about how they felt in terms of being connected to other TAs or connected to their respective departments. So all of our questions in both the Likert questions and the long form questions really center around three themes of confidence, community, and mindset. And these responses from the long form questions were then coded into separate categories. And how we did that was really just broadly putting them into negative, neutral, positive, so more of emotional categories, and then this pedagogical category where if they, in their responses, were talking about teaching strategies directly or how to improve as a TA, things like that would fall under our pedagogical category. And to do this, we coded each response to all the long form questions separately from analyzing the Likert data. And when we were coding these responses, we would just pick out keywords or key phrases and code those directly, and then put them into the bins that you see on the screen right now. So in an example, when asked about how they would feel having a peer come and watch them, this TA's response was, honest, I wouldn't feel comfortable having someone watching me, although it is good to get some feedback. This coded into, there's two codes here that we pulled out that wouldn't feel comfortable and good to get some feedback. So each response that we read and coded through could end up with having a single or multiple codes that we would then put into our categories. So we would categorize these two codes then into not feeling comfortable or uncomfortable as a negative category, and then good to get feedback as a positive category. This also does border with pedagogical, but as you'll see in some of the later quotes, some of these quotes or pedagogical quotes would be more about how they viewed the experience or in terms of their teaching. So our TA peer observation data, we had 44 individual TAs that were both graduate and undergraduate students. We had a mix of novice or TAs that had never TA'd before and veteran TAs who had at least TA'd once before. We also had some that were unknown because due to circumstances did not fill out the pre-survey, which had the metadata about who they were as a TA. Completing these surveys were entirely optional, though going through the peer observation was a requirement in both of the designs. So we had 17 that were in that structured design that used the modified Copus tool, and we had 27 that used the informal. So when we looked at the data, we were first initially interested in, is there a difference between a structured or informal approach? And you'll see these graphs throughout, but these were just some of our Likert questions. So we have pre and post, asked them in both surveys. So we'll see the proportions of the responses along the x-axis. And so again, we kind of group them into our themes of mindset, community, and confidence. You're going to see bars like this, that all the bars represent 100% or the full proportion of the responses. Darker green being that the TAs very much so agreed with the statement, and then red being not at all. So when we look at the data, when we compare the informal approach to the structured approach, we didn't see a lot of difference. Most of the difference comes down here at the confidence, where you see that in the structured approach, there was a little bit less confident. And we also don't really see any clear trends with community and overall with the mindset. Seeing something red is actually good here because we don't want the students to think that the questions were written more with a fixed mindset that learning or teaching can't change. So it's good to see red. But because we didn't see much difference, we decided to combine our data sets and then just separate into the novice and veteran TAs. So that's what we will see throughout. So looking at the confidence then, something that stuck out was that our novice TAs really gained from the experience. So there we had some that didn't feel as confident overall, and we saw a shift where they all then felt very confident. So some of the quotes that we pull out from this is that the novices were saying that it was beneficial because it did raise their confidence. They felt it was helpful and encouraging to have the conversation with somebody that was more experienced. Again, not all of the pairs would have a novice and an experienced TAs. It was just by their own schedules. We also saw that the veteran TAs found that it was beneficial because they were given feedback from the person that they observed that they gave them new perspectives for their teaching. So this is an example of a pedagogical code that we pulled out from those data. Shifting to community, what we noticed between the novice and the veteran TAs is that it's really the novices, again, that make a shift towards feeling much more connected to other TAs or even connected to the department. We do have a couple veteran TAs that feel less connected. I was able to look at the codes in terms of some of the long form responses, and this TA likely got paired up with somebody that didn't provide a lot of feedback to them because they were already very well experienced. But overall, the novice felt that at the beginning in their pre-survey that they could only go to the lab instructor. And we saw the shifts going then feeling more connected to the TAs, where we saw a lot in the codes that the novice TAs felt that they were more connected and felt more comfortable going to a TA and weren't as intimidated by going to a TA, or also felt if they felt intimidated by the instructor in the beginning, they felt much more connected after this peer observation. They also felt that it was awesome and having the chance to attend a class of an experienced TA, because then they can learn many things about the good way of teaching, managing time, lab materials, etc. So we again just saw a tighter relationship between the codes from our qualitative data with our Likert data in the novice TAs. The growth mindset, again, seeing red is good here. What we noticed was that some of the veteran TAs didn't really have that growth mindset. And again, some of it could be due to how they're paired, if they're paired with an inexperienced TA, or if they're paired with somebody that didn't provide as much constructive feedback as we had encouraged in either that informal design or the structured design. However, overall, they found that it was an effective way for the TAs to improve their teaching abilities. They felt that it was a reciprocal, so that both would benefit from the kinds of communications. And in a post survey, they reflected that it was good to share the experiences and ideas, and it helped them grow a lot as an instructor. So overall, just to conclude with some positive sentiments that we saw in the codes when we asked them about how it felt to have a peer observe their teaching, was we see this shift they were writing more in the post surveys, so there was more to code, and there was a lot more positive and pedagogical codes or sentiments in their responses. A negative response was that they felt not very comfortable, makes them very self-conscious about their teaching techniques, and that came from a veteran TA. We also, of course, have seen, as I've shared already, that a lot of the novice TAs felt that it was very helpful and encouraging. Also having that more experienced TA definitely validated them and gave them confidence. And then overall for the pedagogical, we saw a quote from a novice TA that it was quite insightful, and only rarely do they get to see others run their tutorials. And so this helped them get an understanding of teaching style and philosophy. And so again, most of the novice TAs were really in their codes hinting at some of the ideas of bringing that sense of community together and of course increasing their confidence. So overall with this study, we found that mostly this peer intervention or peer observation helps TAs with their perception of their confidence or sense of community, mainly in those two categories. And that we find that there's not really a huge difference between the structured or informal design. And we don't see any difference in Likert data, but some of the codes do suggest that there was less anxious feelings from those TAs that use the modified COPUS or the structured design, likely because they had a task to focus on. And we found that mostly the novice benefited the most from the experience. And so the impact on teaching, I just want to leave you with this quote that they found it very eye-opening because they were able to see the way the other TAs taught their tutorials and with the same content as their own. I was able to reflect upon the differences between their methods and my own for both class engagement and lecturing. And so with this opportunity, we are now modeling some of the approaches that we do as instructors by building our own sense of community to our TAs, which can help make them feel more included, more confident, and have a sense of community. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to, of course, all the incredible teaching assistants that did work in the course and participate in the meetings, and of course, participate in the surveys, our Simon Fraser University lecturers, and of course, Tristan Hay, who ran this at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. And I'd also like to thank the BioTap community for providing Megan with feedback on earlier ideas in the development of this research. And I'd like to take any questions if there's time or any suggestions on how we could best corroborate the qualitative data with our Likert data. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Cassandra. That was a great talk. So we do have several questions we'll try to get through in the next few minutes. So Audrey asked, were grad TAs matched with grad TAs and undergrad TAs matched with undergrad TAs?
There was no exact method to the matching. It really came down to the scheduling. Most of the TAs, of course, all as students have schedules. And so ideally, it would be really nice to have something that's structured in that way where we can have somebody that's more experienced with somebody that's novice to kind of get at some more of those questions and maybe help the veteran TAs get the most out of the experience as well. But for the matching of the TAs, it really came down to scheduling. So there was not an easy way for me to identify the experience level of the TAs because not many of them included the name of who their partner was in their survey data.
Got it. Thank you. So second question from Summer, were folks randomly assigned to structured versus informal groups?
No, so we had one institution or one site. So at Simon Fraser University, they used the structured approach, and at University of British Columbia, they used the informal, or asked just to have a chat with each other afterwards and provide some feedback.
Great, thank you. Then a couple more from Audrey. What statistical analysis did you use to compare patterns in TA Likert responses?
So with the Likert data responses, I've looked at just paired t-tests. We have mostly, what I didn't present today is that we do have matched survey data. We don't have complete matched data with all the TAs, so I can't do like a paired t-test, but overall I've looked at some t-tests and just comparing the shifts or gains, I guess you could say, in our Likert data of shifting them towards agreeing to something or feeling more confident in the community.
Great. We might actually have time for the very last question, clarifying question from Audrey. You define growth mindset as a TA's view of their own skills versus a TA's view of their students' ability to change.
There were two questions that got at growth mindset. So they had one question that was student learning can't change and TA ability can't change, or no teaching can change. So they actually overall had 4 questions in the Likert data that 2 of them were about students and 2 of them were about their own ability. And so looking at both of them, again, it was the veteran TAs that kind of seemed more in a fixed mindset, where the novice TAs, after having the intervention of observing other TAs or maybe going through the experience of just TAing throughout that term, shifting their view.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cassandra. I think we are at the end of our Q&A. that was a wonderful talk.
Thank you.